Hi everybody, it is a great privilege to be here talking to you all. Hope you are all keeping safe and well during these extraordinary times. Who would have imagined that this would happen? It's straight out of a science fiction novel, isn't it? In fact, I can't remember the author, but one of Peter Robinson, I think, he wrote a book about lockdown. And he was even though he's quite a famous writer, he was rejected because by most of the publishers, because they said it would be quite a, it's quite an impossible thing. It's unreal, unbelievable. And then somebody, when the lockdown was happening, somebody asked him on Twitter, "Oh, have you considered writing a book about it?" And he said, "Oh, actually, I do have a book about a similar situation." And he went back and he looked it up and sent it to his publisher, and his publisher published it. So it was one of the first books on lockdown, and it's called Lockdown, I think. It's just been released. Speaking of which, this is why I'm here to talk about my new book. But what I wanted to say is that I think during the lockdown, during these times, I think what keeps us going and what keeps us, at least for me, what keeps me going are stories. So many lovely stories. I mean, there have been some really sad stories as well, but there have been some lovely stories of people coming to other people's aid, helping, and being stepping up to help, to support their neighbors and their friends during this time, and such lovely, beautiful stories. So stories are what I think binds us all together and keeps us going. And that's the other thing to have come out of this lockdown. It's the kindness people have. We have all realized. I think we have all found our better selves, isn't it? We are trying, we are thinking of others, we are finding ways to connect. Even though we can't hug, we can't meet our loved ones, we are finding other ways in which to connect and keep in touch. So that has been one of the other nice things about the lockdown. And the wonderful ordinary people emerging as heroes, all these wonderful doctors, nurses, care workers, teachers, or people stepping up to do so much for all of us, to keep us all safe, putting themselves in danger. We are so grateful. And the other wonderful thing is libraries. When the lockdown was announced, for me, libraries, stories, and libraries are my happy place. So I thought, I will miss the libraries. I'll miss stories. What will I do if I run out of books? But the libraries have been wonderful. They've stepped up and they have such a big online library. So many ways they have expanded their online borrowing online library. And not only that, it's the activities, wonderful activities which the libraries have been doing, for which I took part, didn't do very well, but took part in the quizzes. The quizzes the Kingston libraries ran on Friday evenings, and many other. I loved the review, the book review programs, and so many other wonderful and virtual. Who would have thought that there are so many virtually we can do so much and get together in a virtual way? It's wonderful. It's hopeful. It gives us hope, isn't it? And I hope you are all doing well and keeping safe. On the question of hope, my new book is The Orphan's Gift. Orphan's Gift. Oh, I don't know how to hold it up so that it... I think it's showing a mirror image. Please forgive me. This is the first time I'm doing... I'm rubbish at these sorts of things. I'm not good at videos. and stuff. My daughter had to set this up for me. So, and I don't know how to hold it so that it doesn't show the mirror image. Sorry. Anyway, this is my new book, The Orphan's Gift. It came out on the 29th of April. I write historical fiction, which is set partly in India and partly in the UK. I love to explore the stories of women, how women have changed, how the choices for women have changed, and how over the 19th century. So I write 20th century. So I write a historical fiction set in the early 20th century to the late 20th century. And I love to explore how freedom for women, choices for women have changed, and how women themselves have changed over time. But also in many ways how they haven't changed that much, how the although they have their choices, their freedom for women has improved, and they still are restrained and constrained in ways which, a woman at the early 20th century would maybe relate to. So I like to explore that, and I also like exploring the differences between cultures. So my protagonist, I normally have two or more protagonists in my books, in each of my books. This is The Orphan's Gift is my 9th book. And I love to explore, normally one of the protagonists is British and one of the protagonists is Indian. And I like to explore the clash of cultures, how women not only are constrained by society but also by their cultures and customs, and how something which is perfectly acceptable in one culture is completely an anathema in another culture. So I like to write about that. I like to explore that. I like to imagine what happens when these two different women from very different backgrounds come together, and also how they might be very different, but also in some ways they face similar choices. They can relate to each other even though they might be completely different. So I like to explore that. Also, I think the 20th century, from the 20th century, 1920s to 1950s, they saw 1910 to 1950, they saw 2 wars. So there were 2 wars. There was so much happening in India. There was a fight for freedom. They were trying to get their independence from the British rule. So there was that. So there were so many opposing forces pulling people in many different directions. There was a lot of drama. There was a lot happening, lot going on. But what I like to explore is, against the big background of the 2 wars and the fight for freedom, for Indian independence from British rule, personal stories, how it affected personal, individual people who were living during these extraordinary times like we are now. So I like to explore all that in my stories. So I'll tell you a little bit. I'll read you the blurb of The Orphan's Gift. So this is what is on the back of the book. She allows herself to kiss her perfect child just once. She wraps the baby in her last gift, a hand-knitted cardigan embroidered with a water lily pattern. "You're better off without me," she whispers, and although every step breaks her heart, she walks away. 1910, India. Young and curious Alice, with her spun gold hair, grows up in her family's sprawling compound with parents as remote as England, the cold country she has never seen. It is Raju, the son of a servant, with whom she shares her secrets. Together their love grows like roses, but leaves deep thorns. Because when they get too close, Alice's father drags them apart, sending Raju far away and banishing Alice to England. 1944. Intelligent and kind Janaki is raised in an orphanage in India. The nuns love to tell the story. Janaki's arrival stopped the independence riots outside the gates as the men on both sides gazed at the starry-eyed little girl left in a beautiful hand-knitted cardigan. Janaki longs for her real mother, the woman who was forced to abandon her, wrapped in a precious gift. Now old enough to be a grandmother and living alone in India, Alice watches children play under the tamarind trees, haunted by the terrible mistake she made 50 years ago. It's just an ordinary afternoon until a young girl with familiar eyes appears with a photograph and Alice must make a choice. Will she spend the rest of her life consumed by dreams of the past, or can she admit her mistakes and choose love and light at last? So that is the blurb of my new book. I'm going to read an extract from it soon. But what I wanted to talk about is how lockdown has affected my writing. So I think as a writer, I think most of the time I have to sit in, for me it's, I have to self-isolate anyway, because, writing is quite a solitary activity. You just sit there and get lost in the lives of your characters and imagine. So, but lockdown, I think, for me as a writer, I observe, I observe everything. I think all writers, we like to observe. What I love is I love watching that time, that time at dusk when it's dusk, but people don't, have not pulled their curtains. So I like to peep in. I am quite a voyeur, and I like to see what is going on. What are the stories, and then I make up stories. So if I see somebody sitting close together but not touching, then I think, oh, a couple sitting close together but not touching. Why? What's going on? Why they and my husband says, oh, there she goes making up stories again. Or I will see somebody with their face pressed to the bus window, passing by, just a glimpse. And from their expression, I will make up a story for them. Oh, are they angry? Are they sad? Are they upset? So I think for me, the lockdown, I think what I have seen from the lockdown is hope. I think what has come through, yes, there's been desperate sadness, loss of life, unprecedented and very, very sad. But also there has been hope. There's been wonderful stories of people reaching out to each other. I've got, people just asking, are you okay? And before, when you asked, are you okay? You didn't really mean it. Hi, are you okay? But now you do. Now people do. They ask, have you been okay? And they mean it. They do ask, are you okay? I think it's connections. People are trying to connect, finding ways to connect. To give you an example, my neighbors, we have every day at 11 o'clock, we have a workout session, over the fence workout session. So we do the workout in our garden, they do the workout in their garden. We are lucky to have a small garden. So over the fence workout session. So this way, we have come together. People are finding ways to connect which they wouldn't necessarily have done. Things which we would have taken for granted before. The other thing that I found is that you don't take things for granted anymore. Things which we had taken for granted have now become. We have realized how much we had, how much how much we took for granted before, and hopefully we will not be taking it so much for granted anymore. So that's the other. So it's these small personal stories, I think, of people reaching out, neighbors helping each other, looking out for the older neighbors who can't go shopping, helping them to get their shopping, asking if you're okay. It's all this which I think will work its way into my stories. So yes, it is depressing, but there have also been hopeful. There's also hope. There's also small acts of kindness which are maybe small for us, for the people who are, for people who offer the kindness, but the ones who are who can't go out of their house, if somebody does their shopping for them or just asks them, who haven't seen somebody for a while, and a neighbor knocks and says, "Are you okay?" It means the world. It means the world. So it's all these personal stories, I think, so which will be working their way. I think, how has lockdown affected my writing? I think it has shown me to appreciate, I think shown all of us actually to appreciate what we had, what we have, to not take health, health and these small little lovely things for granted, to appreciate them, to take every day and appreciate it and live it to the full. So I think that will be making its way into my stories, because my stories, they just germinate in my head, and then slowly all these little things germinate in my head, and then I go, what if, and then it comes out in my writing. Has it made me more focused or stifled? It has been harder because everybody is home. Normally, I would be able to write, children would go to school and my husband to work, and I would be able to, I had that time to write. And also there is, of course, the meals, the 3 meals, you have to cook more and all the housework, etc. So there is less time, but in other ways you make the most of, hopefully, I mean, that is the you hope to make the most of the time you have, but it doesn't always work out that way. So some days are better than others. Some days I can write, some days I get the time to write, other days I don't get the time to write. But then I suppose the positive is I get this unprecedented time with my family, and because so I think that is the thing, because my son has just started his first year at uni, and I was missing him dreadfully. I didn't realize how much I would. Everyone said it would be hard, but it was. I mean, it was really hard to. So he is back, and I know that he will be back. He'll be going back to uni soon. So it's nice to have them home. So I'm not complaining. Some days I can't, I don't have the time to write or the space to write, but I'm not complaining. It's precious time with family, which who knows when we will get this again, isn't it? So some days, yes, I think what has helped is I put on the TV, and then you watch the news, and then you get a bit depressed, but I think, but then on the positive side, there's also some lovely stories as well, like the Captain Tom who walked, who raised so much for the NHS, and all these lovely, wonderful stories that you hear as well. So some days it gets me down, I think, like with everybody, but other days are good. So do I look for new ways to find inspiration? Has it boosted my imagination? Yes, it has boosted imagination. I mean, it's all of us. I mean, I'm sure there will be everyone. I was seeing in the some of the other writers were joking that there will be lots more lockdown stories. So it has boosted all of our imagination, and I'm sure that there will be stories about what happens when everybody is stuck in this, together. You might have mind wandering, especially the crime writers. There might be a murder or two set in during the lockdown. So yes, there are stories everywhere, isn't it? Everywhere you look. So yes, it has boosted my imagination in some. Yes. So okay. So now I'm going to read you the prologue of The Orphan's Gift. So this is the prologue. So, Orphan's gift, as from the blurb, it's told from the point of view of two characters, two protagonists, Alice and Janaki. So, the prologue also is from the point of view of two protagonists, Alice and Janaki. So, Alice, momentous. Alice's life changes on a perfectly ordinary afternoon in the midst of a perfectly ordinary week. Later, she will wonder, did she have any inkling of what was to come, that drowsy, jasmine and dust-tinted afternoon? She will look back at the day, her actions, the same as every other day, talking, listening, playing with and helping the children, and wonder, did she have a premonition, a hunch, that something momentous was poised to happen? No, she will decide. She had absolutely no inkling that her orderly world, with its everyday routines, was about to tilt on its axis. That this day, which seemed like any other, was anything but. She is in the little room off the nursery, which passes for her office, catching up on paperwork while the children have their afternoon siesta, when there is a knock at her door. And with it, although she doesn't know it then, events are set in motion that will completely, irrevocably, inevitably alter the course of her life. So that is Alice, prologue. Now Janaki, one moment. So the book is told from the point of view of Alice and Janaki, and now this is prologue, Janaki, one moment. It takes so little to change a life. The whisper-soft sigh between one breath and the next. That's all it takes to devastate the life you have so carefully constructed. All it takes to pay for the happiness that is more than your due. All it takes to balance the giant account sheet monitored by a punishing God who keeps a tally. Janaki's stomach spasms, her body reacting to what she has just heard before her mind can make sense of it. Around her, the world goes on, a woman's low, throaty laughter clashing discordantly with the plaintive mewl of a kitten. Two men arguing, each louder than the other. A child sucking the juice from a mango, his chin spattered yellow with syrup, attracting flies. A woman carrying pails of water, one in each hand, while balancing another expertly on her head. The bangles adorning her wrists, chiming a merry tune, glimmering saffron and marigold in the dancing sunshine that falls in gilded streaks on the dust by the doorway against which Janaki is slumped. All it takes is one moment for happiness to transform into tragedy, for everything to go to nothing, for life to never be the same again. All it takes is one moment. So that was the prologue from my book. I will read you now from Janaki's section, a chapter from Janaki's section. It's Janaki, 1944, Summer Sky. Clang, clang, clang. In the girls' dormitory, Janaki jerks awake, eyes opening to the shadow-steeped darkness, vibrating with deep bronze reverberations. The others all sleep on, seemingly oblivious to the persistent ringing of the bell. How can they sleep through the noise? The air in the room is hot and heavy, scented with many slumbering breaths, the sticky sweet dreams of the girls lying side by side on mats on the floor. Janaki gets up softly so as not to disturb her neighbor and best friend Aarti, although she doesn't know why she bothers. Aarti would sleep through an earthquake and wake up wondering why she was pinned down by rubble. Janaki is grateful that she is closest to the door and that there's nobody on her right. She'd be claustrophobic, stuck in the midst of a row of girls. I sleepwalk, you know. You don't want to be woken by me, stumbling over you, blinking and weaving like a boot, she declared to the other girls, and they had believed her, allowing her the coveted spot by the door. Sister Nandita had called her aside. It doesn't do to tell lies. But Sister's all-seeing eyes had speared Janaki. You don't really sleepwalk, Janaki. Fiddling with her clothes, Janaki had been unable to meet Sister's gaze, But I do need to get up in the night to use the toilet. Why not say that then? The others will argue that they want to as well. Do you have to have the space by the door? Can't you share? I don't like being hemmed in. You can sleep by the door for a month. Then you will allow others a turn. Yes? Biting her lower lip and studiously avoiding Sister Nandita's eyes, Janaki had said, okay. But at the same time, her mind had been frantically trying to come up with ways to convince the others not to claim the place by the door, even when offered it. Perhaps, out of Sister Nandita's hearing, she could convince them it was haunted, cursed. Now, Janaki slips out of the door and into the corridor. She peers down through the railings, inhaling the metallic odor of rust, towards the entrance to the orphanage, where there is a bell that can be pulled when someone leaves a baby outside. One of the nuns, usually Sister Mully, who is the most junior and thus always on night duty, would come to rescue it. Saint Ursula's orphanage is in the middle of a busy street in the heart of the city of Jamjatpur. When our fellow Carmelite nuns from England started Saint Ursula's, this was a quiet street. But the city grew, and now we are right in the center. Along with Jamjatpur, the orphanage has grown as well. We are bursting at the seams, Sister Shanti had once informed Janaki as they sat threading jasmine together. The businesses on either side of us keep wanting to buy our land, the compound with fruit trees at the back and the shady area in front with its flower bushes and vegetable patch. But our benefactors, the Carmelite nuns from England, who still own this property, don't want to sell. This is the best orphanage in the city. The children here growing up well-rounded and... Why then every evening do we have to pick out worms from the flour that will be used for our porridge and chapatis the next day? Janaki had asked, surprising even herself. Usually she was quiet and rule-abiding, not daring to question the nuns, even on things she privately disagreed with. But the memory of the worm she had found in her chapati at lunch prompted this unaccustomed feistiness. Sister Shanti had stopped weaving jasmine and had perused Janaki with beady eyes. "You're sounding very ungrateful, Janaki. It's not like you." "Sister, you are 1,000 times better off than the street kids who don't have a roof to sleep under. They'd be grateful for any food, even the leftovers of those chapatis you're complaining about. That flour, by the time it arrives from abroad, is not at its best, but at least you have 3 meals a day, which is more than can be said for..." "I'm sorry," Janaki had been chastened. Smells of stewing tea and roasting vegetables, sounds of clanging utensils were wafting from the kitchen, which was directly to the left of where they were sitting beneath the mango trees, fashioning fragrant wreaths to place before the holy statues in the small chapel attached to the orphanage. The other orphans were having their afternoon nap, girls and boys in their dormitories on opposite sides of the orphanage, separated by the nuns' rooms and the chapel, as were most of the nuns. Janaki did not like afternoon naps, and Sister Shanti felt the same. "If I nap now, then I can't sleep at night." Wanting to change the topic and Sister Shanti's mood, Janaki had asked, "How did I come to be here?" She never tired of hearing the story of her arrival at the orphanage as a newborn 8 years earlier, and Sister Shanti always obliged. "Oh, your arrival was dramatic. It was right in the middle of the riots." Her eyes had glowed with the mellow light of reminiscence. "What riots?" Janaki had asked, Sister's cue, although of course she knew. A gentle breeze was stroking Janaki's face with soft caresses, like her absent mother's palms would have done, she fancied. "The Hindu-Muslim riots of 1936, Sister Shanti had sighed, her expression pensive. "Not much has changed since then. Hindus and Muslims are still at loggerheads, and if anything, the violence is getting worse. They all want freedom from the British, but instead of finding common ground in this, they are turning on each other. However, thankfully, at the moment at least, there's peace in Jamjatpur." She had fallen silent, both she and Janaki listening to the noises outside the sleepy compound. Horses neighing, carriage wheels creaking, people chattering and arguing, vendors shouting out their wares, their tones slightly desperate, beggars jangling their coins, their cans, the paltry coins rattling inside. The city was on fire, houses burning, corpses littering the road, Sister Shanti continued. There was so much chaos, such mindless violence. And in the midst of all this, a reedy, unmistakable cry, the mewling siren of a newborn. We didn't have the bell at the time, you see. That was only installed later when... Sister Shanti swallowed, shadows crowding her soft honey eyes. When what, sister? Nothing. Please tell, sister. One of the babies... He must have been left at dawn, but whoever left the child did not rattle the gate to let us know. Or perhaps they did, but not loud enough for us to hear. And Janaki had nudged as sister was lost in musing. We were busy that day. The bishop was visiting, so we didn't check the little nook by the gate as usual. The child must have been sickly, and it was a very hot day. By the time we found him later that afternoon, he was dehydrated. We couldn't save him. Sister Shanti had sighed deeply, her eyes sparkling gold. Oh! Janaki had not heard this part of the story in previous retellings. A dip formed in her stomach at the thought of that unfortunate boy, a stinging in her eyes. After that, we installed the bell, Sister Shanti had sighed again. Then, shaking her head, Now then, I've gone off on a tangent. I'm beginning to do so more and more nowadays. Yes, you are, Janaki had thought, but hadn't dared to say out loud, having learned from experience that although they, or at least Sister Shanti, admitted their faults, the nuns did not like you to conquer. Where was I? The cry of a baby in the middle of the riots, Janaki had prompted. We were in the chapel praying for peace. Then we heard the unmistakable cry of a baby in the midst of all the agonized screams. But Mother Superior was leading the prayer and we didn't want to. Mother Superior can be quite scary, Janaki had said with feeling, recalling the time she had been summoned to see her and had been made to kneel on the floor, contemplating her sins while looking up at Christ on the cross, his mild, blood-stained face smiling down at her despite his crown of thorns. Then there was this banging at the gate and someone calling, Nuns, sisters! Mother Superior opened her eyes and nodded at me. I went running at once. Sister Shanti had paused again to take a breath. A crow cawed up among the mango trees. A blue and yellow sequined butterfly, like sun-splashed sky, landed on a maroon hibiscus flower next to Janaki. At the gate, a miracle, Sister Shanti had informed her. The Hindus and Muslims who'd been engaged in fighting unto death were all gathered together and smiling down at you, united in admiration. You were such a beautiful baby, wrapped in a green cardigan that brought out the unusual starry blue of your eyes. You were blinking up at the men who had, a minute before, been hell-bent upon violence, ready to commit murder. Those mercenaries were misty-eyed when I came to collect you. And when I came to collect you, one of them said, This one's special. Once I took you in, they started fighting again, taking up where they'd left off, all traces of tenderness gone. Now, Janaki brings her thought back to the present as she stands with her nose flattened against the iron railings, night pressing, dark and secretive with shadows. Here and there is a golden pinpricked flicker of light. The street outside, never quiet during the day, is now dozy with slumber, even the drunks and street dwellers out for the count. Janaki watches as Sister Malli rubs the sleep from her eyes and opens the gate, gently cradling the bundle left in the nook, bringing it inside. A dog whines plaintively in the alleyway behind the orphanage. A cat jumps off the low, broken wall of the compound opposite, sniffing curiously at the rubbish heaped in the ditch, spilling onto the road. Sister Malli will take the baby to the kitchen, feed it with some watered-down milk, and settle it in one of the mats in the baby room. Janaki waits, and sure enough, A shadow unpeels itself from the wall further along the road. The woman's silhouette, face covered by a veil, is just visible as she slips into the enveloping, obliterating darkness, gently wiping, Janaki imagines, tears from her eyes. The mothers who leave their children here, will they miss them? She once asked. Of course, tremendously. It is because they love their children so much that they give them away, Sister Nandita had replied. They feel their children have a better chance here at the orphanage than with them. But Janaki was puzzled. How could living here with strict nuns, unyielding routine, harsh punishments for small transgressions, mealy, worm-riddled food be better than being with family? Sister Nandita divined her unvoiced question. They are at their wits' end, undone by circumstances. No proper house, not enough food to go round, no means of providing their offspring with an education. Janaki nodded with dawning understanding, thinking of the beggars on the streets outside the orphanage, so much worse off than her. No clothes to wear or food to eat, the mothers clinging to their children, their bloodshot eyes telling stories of desperation and heartbreak. The woman stops at the end of the street, turns once. Her face, Janaki imagines, watery and wistful, although all she can see is a shadowy outline. Janaki slips back into the dormitory and lies down beside Aarti, who is snoring away, oblivious. The thick, close air tasting of sleep and haunted by dreams. She thinks of the baby downstairs, now a part of the orphanage. The mother going to wherever her home is, if she has one. Heartsick, but hoping, praying, her child has a better life because of her sacrifice. Janaki dreams of a woman who leaves her child by the gate of the orphanage in the middle of riots. The woman's face is in silhouette, but her shoulders are hunched and shuddering. She is wiping her face with the veil of her sari even as she sends a prayer, colored the transcendent yellow of hope, against the odds to the gods. In the nook by the gate, the child, wearing a cardigan the hue of rain-burnished fields, smiles up at the men who crowd around her, admiring her eyes, which are the startling blue of a cloudless summer sky. So this was Janaki in 1944. This book goes all the way from 1910 till 2000. Okay, I'm going to answer some questions which some of you have asked. So, sorry, I'm useless at these things. Okay, here. So Louise, this is from Louise. When creating a character, do you create a mood board for their background story and development? For example, do you note down a particular fabric, color, season or scent that personifies them? Your characters always have such brilliant depth. Oh, thank you, Louise. No, I don't really create a mood board at all. I just have an idea of my character in my head. They become, as I write, they become more real to me, many times more real than, I mean, sometimes I have to remind myself they are not real. They are just characters, you know. And I feel once my book is done, once the story is done, I feel bereft. I miss them. I miss my characters. It's sad. I know. So no, I don't create a mood board. I just somehow, I think they are already there. They are the ones. In some ways, sometimes when I'm writing, I write something and then I think, no. It's almost as if they are I know this sounds crazy, but it's almost as if they are speaking in my head and telling me, no, I wouldn't do that. And I go back and change it because it's almost as if the characters are telling me, are angry at me for making them do something they wouldn't do. I know it's mad. My daughter says, Mom, which character are you talking to now in your head? So I hope that answered your question, Louise. Thank you. And Matthew asked, have you ever started writing a story with no idea where it was going, but just explored the story by writing it? or do you prefer knowing the end before you write a book? I do it the other way. I always start without knowing where it's going. I like it that way because it just meanders along and then comes to a natural conclusion. So although with my first novel it just went on meandering and I had to almost force it to come back. With my first novel I had, because there was no deadline, I had the time to go veer off at tangents, go and explore all these side characters and all their stories. Whereas now I have to be a bit more disciplined because I am under contract and under deadline. So I have to finish the first draft and send it to my editor by a certain time. So I do try and be more disciplined. I have a vague idea now because my publishers want to know roughly that I know what I'm doing. So I do have a vague idea where it is going, but I love it. I love not knowing everything. I love not knowing, just allowing my, just going with the story, going with the flow and seeing where it goes. So yeah, I think that's the bit I like best. So just allowing the character. At a certain point in the story, the characters take over and they are the boss. I know it's odd. We are crazy writers, I think. So, this is from Amy, lovely Amy. Have you ever suffered from writer's block? If so, how do you get yourself out of it? Touch wood. I haven't suffered from writer's block because I think mostly because I don't have the time to write in one go. I don't have a specific time to write. So I am always thinking of the story when I'm not writing, when I'm doing all the other things, I'm thinking of what I should write. So when I do sit down to write, it comes because I have already planned it in my head while I'm washing the dishes or having a shower or cooking or I'm thinking of my characters, thinking of the story all the time. So I think I have so many ideas. Touch wood. I have not suffered from writer's block so far, luckily. But there comes in every novel around so every novel is around 100,000 words. So around the 30,000 word mark, I think, oh, this is all rubbish. Why am I doing this? It's going nowhere, and I have to. It's self-doubt and think I have to constantly battle. I want to just leave it and not come back to it. So that is around the 30,000 mark where I think, oh, this is useless. This is rubbish. And then I think if I keep pushing on, after around 5 to 10,000, it happens every book, and every book I think, oh, I can't. And then if I have to keep pushing myself to write, and then the characters take over. So I suppose, yeah, that is one of the things I do suffer from with regards to writing. So there's one more question from Amy. When you were little, do you remember writing and illustrating your own stories? Can you remember what any of them were called or what they were about? I remember making a book called The Adventures of Smokey, which was my childhood cat growing up, and I illustrated it myself badly. I love that name, The Adventures of Smokey. What a lovely name for your childhood cat. Oh, and sounds wonderful. I would love to see it, Amy, if you still have the copy. And I'm sure, I would love to see it. Yes, I did. I can't remember a time I was not writing. I used to doodle and I used to write. I cannot draw to save my life. So I used to, but I remember this. I wrote a 7-page poem called Mother. And that one, for my mum, and I made it into a book, and I gave it to her and everything. So that one I remember, it was titled Mother. But I used to write I was always writing. I was always making up stories in my head. So, but that's the one. I remember the mother one, but I have lost all of them, so I don't have any of them now. So, yeah. So that was the. But I, for as long as I remember, I've been making stories up in my head. I think they are my escape, and they are my they transport me. They are my, oh, I love stories, and that is why it's such an honor and privilege to be doing this, talking to you all via the libraries. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the libraries for everything you do, for keeping us, for making sure we always have stories as escape, and also for us for this. Thank you. Bye everybody. Keep safe and keep well. Thank you for having me. Bye.